Are these microphones better here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one, I think, died a while ago. Distracted me here. The EV guy showed me how to dim the lights, but there's always a risk with that. So, does it work for you?
We mostly stay away.
Okay. I'm going to talk about a lot of things that are changing within the foundation. My boss, Bill McCarthy, has me put up this caution. There is a requirement if you're going to be writing a grant that you have to attend training once a year. And you had one person attend for this coming year. Now, some changes in the foundation. What you see here are what we used to have. So there are things like ambassadorial scholars, district simplified grants, group study exchanges. You may recall all of those. That's changed, and we have two things. We have district grants, and we have global grants. District grants are at the district and below. Global grants are international. I'll be talking about the Rotary Foundation, and I put this slide up just to make the distinction. The Rotary Foundation is not Rotary International. They're two separate and distinct things, but the role of the foundation is to support Rotary International. Types of funds coming to the foundation. There are three types of funds. The annual fund, this is where your Paul Harris contributions go. The endowment fund, which used to be called the permanent fund, there's been a name change there. The endowment fund is generally funded by gifts and bequests. Any members of the bequest society here? Any benefactors? People. And then restricted funds. These are funds for a specific purpose, like Polio Plus, like Hurricane Sandy. Now, to try and simplify this plumbing diagram, the annual program funds, again, are funded by your Paul Harris donations. The money stays there for 3 years. The proceeds from the earnings of the fund are used to help offset the cost of running the foundation. That's not, in some people's mind, that's running the money. That's not it. It's running the foundation and the oversight and the stewardship. For example, when I got in this position, I got on an interesting email list. So we just had a 5-year audit in Uganda of a water project that Bainbridge Island did. So the cost of flying the cadre into Uganda, their support there, writing that up, that's an ongoing cost of the foundation. And you might ask, why did they quit after 5 years? Because a big focus of the foundation is to make sure what we do is sustainable. What we don't need are a bunch of abandoned projects with rusted Rotary signs on them. So you'll notice that trend as you get into the global grants. At the end of 3 years, 50% of the donations we made 3 years ago come back to the district designated funds. 50% go to the World Fund. Now, what are these funds? The district designated fund is our money at the Rotary Foundation that is used to match club money for global grants. Club money is matched for global grants by both the district funds and then also the World Fund. The district designated fund is controlled by the district. We have to approve the use of that money for a grant. The foundation trustees control the World Fund. The endowment fund, as I said, this is money that's coming in as a bequest usually. The principal is not spent, the earnings are spent, and there's one twist here. If when you make your gift to the endowment fund, you can elect to have 50% of the earnings of your gift passed over to the district designated funds. This year we got $3,800 from earnings from a designated fund where that split is on. Otherwise, all the earnings go into the World Fund. Now, to spend money locally, you have a district community grant outstanding for some scholarships. To spend that money locally, we have to bring it down to the district. So we literally, and I'll go through the mechanism, we have a local checking account for local spending. And that's how we get the money down here to spend for local projects. A little bit on the foundation. This is a great projection system. This is the first one that actually shows up well. You may remember 2008. These are the earnings of investment on the endowment fund. So there have been changes because of what occurred there. You know, there are probably people in here who work for foundations, grants and such. You know, the old rule of thumb was you could spend 5%, not run into issues. And that worked until it didn't work in 2008. So what happens now, remember, each gift to the endowment fund is tracked throughout its life. They look at the earnings on that gift for the last calendar year, and then they look at whether the gift itself is above or below its initial value. And that assigns a spending rate to that particular gift, which then aggregates up to the spending rate for the foundation. So there could be times when there is no spending. Now, I put this slide up because I run into folks who will say, well, you guys have a goal of $1 billion by 2025 in the endowment fund. You really don't need my money. I'm going to give it to somebody else. Well, what we actually have in the endowment fund is $352 million. This light blue area is termed an expectancy by the foundation. So for those of you who raised your hand, there's no rush, but you are being counted on in here. Now, you might have seen in the Rotary magazine there's a change to the funding model for the foundation. What used to fund it were the earnings on the annual fund. What will fund it going forward is 5% of the earnings of the World Fund will go into an account to help pay the overhead, and 5% of global grant cash contributions. Now, to translate that, what that means is, if you, as a club, want to do a global grant, when you go on the website and put the grant together, it will automatically add a 5% fee to your contribution to support the administration on this. It does not impact us with the district designated funds. Now, this is how we get the money down to the local spending account to write checks. Each district in Rotary can request up to 50% of their district designated funds. Again, this is up at the Rotary Foundation level, to come down to the local level for local spending. We elect to do the full 50%. The district must qualify for this annually. What does the qualification entail? Bill McCarthy goes to training. His training is tested and graded. There is a memorandum of understanding between the Rotary Foundation and the district in terms of the safekeeping and care of the funds in the foundation. And you'll see this MOU trickle down. There's an MOU between the district and the club, and then when you do a grant, there's an MOU between the club and whoever is the recipient of the grant or any third parties involved in the grant. We have to put together a district spending plan. So right now, we are building the spending plan for next year. And the spending plan comes from the summaries of the projects that people say they want to do. Spending has to take place between July 1 and June 30th. And this is critical when you're planning a project, because if you were approved for it and you don't get the project reported in time to have the check cut by June 30th, the money is gone. It goes back to the district designated funds. Projects are submitted on Club Runner. Who's doing the Club Runner for your project? You know? I can't recall who the point of contact is for your.
I think
Richard, correct.
Okay. Maybe he's there working on Club Runner. We have an audit that occurs on this. We have an independent auditor who audits the projects, and then that report goes to the Rotary Foundation. And that's an expense we have. So another way to look at this, I'm using $1 million up here, but our typical district give, if you would, is around $500,000. So the $500,000 is here. Well, we use $1 million. The million's here. Half of that goes to district designated funds, half of it to the World Fund. What happens in this district is we ask for half of that in the district block grant. We have administrative costs. We have some scholarship costs that I'll get into in a minute. And then we have the community grant money. The money that stays at the district designated fund level, we have an automatic $25,000 a year contribution to the Peace Scholar. And I think you did the most recent Peace Scholar in the district. The differences between district grants and global grants. There are some definitional differences. At the district level, for the projects we're doing here, this is the definition that is used. Kind of wordy, but it's fairly broad as well. So your scholarships fit within this definition. If you're doing a global grant, it must fall within one of these 6 areas, and they are fairly narrow areas of focus. And if you go to Rotary.org, not Club Runner, Rotary.org, you'll find a 50-page paper on that, defining what these are. And you were mentioning the schools. I'm not quite sure that would fit in a global grant. You would have to go in there and take a look at that. It might fit under basic education, but they're fairly tight. Now, district community grants. The club must qualify annually. Now, you're partially qualified because you sent someone to training. What you have not done yet is sign the memorandum of understanding for next year. So you're not qualified. As a result of that, if you went on Club Runner now and tried to input a grant, it would not let you. And then you call us and ask what's going on, and we tell you have to sign the MOU. So it's a 2-part thing. I brought one with me for you. The MOU for next Rotary year is signed by next year's president and next year's president-elect. And then that would make you qualify for a grant if you chose. It is a reimbursement of Rotary funds up to $3,500. And the reimbursement comes after the grant has been reported and approved. It's not just check writing. You know, the aspect that got you the grant this year was the fact that you spend a lot of time mentoring students while they're going to school. It's not, we sent 3 Rotarians to present the check, but that you're involved afterward. It could be either local or international. If it is international, it does not require a host Rotary club on the other side. It could be joint with other clubs. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you're working with a third party or an NGO, they must be involved in the memorandum of understanding. And what this lays out is who's responsible for what, who's responsible for sustaining this, making sure this goes forward. The window's already open, April 1st. We have about, when I looked last night, there were about 11 grants in the system already. Project work between June 1 or July 1, May 1, final report by June 1, and everything is on the internet, on Club Writer. So I get a lot of calls. I was driving home from work yesterday and I got a call from a guy up in Squim Sunrise about how to upload something into the computer. So we've got, if you look around the room, we've got this whole range of computer literacy in Rotary, and sometimes it gets a little crazy. Now, what are we doing this year? We are spending $141,428 worth of Rotary Foundation money to fund this much in terms of the total projects. Less than half of the district clubs participated this year. I put this breakdown in because to me it's interesting. The Washington clubs have more of a focus on local things. Columbia, more of a focus on international. I don't know if that speaks to the difference in the safety net between the two countries. I know in looking at the BC clubs, their international ones, they tend to follow their winter migration patterns to Central America. So no one's doing a project in Siberia in the winter. Here are the countries that we have involved. We are trying something new this year. There's been a lot of requests to say, why can't we bring clubs together and combine these things into one project? We're trying that with one project in Washington, one in BC. We're requiring it to be local rather than international. And the reason for that is a couple parts. One is to keep it simple while we're trying to work out these procedures. The other is we don't want this to be used as a backdoor way to get around the restrictions on global grants. You saw the areas of focus, there's a difference there. There are things that you cannot do with global grants that you can do with district grants. An example would be shelter. You can do basic shelter with a district grant. You cannot build a building with a global grant. And I think the difference there, when you start looking at the money, it's hard to have something get out of control with $3,500 if you're dealing with $200,000 of the Rotary Foundation's money. You know, you could end up with a palace somewhere on a beach. So we have a couple of clubs working in this direction now. So the maximum reimbursement would be $10,500, or essentially 3 clubs. Scholarships. I mentioned the ambassadorial scholar program is gone. The district chose to keep a version of that as a district community grant. So there's a $15,000 scholarship. We do 2 of those a year. And what happens here, the global grant scholarships are $30,000. So what our scholarship committee does is select a scholar for next Rotary year by the previous, to see if they could fit them into a global grant. which would give them more money. And from my standpoint, it's better for us at the local level, because if we have to write two $15,000 checks, they are going to come out of the local checkbook. If this happens, if there's a global grant scholarship, the $15,000 that the district has to put up as part of the $30,000 comes from the district designated funds at the Rotary Foundation level. So therefore, I've got $30,000 more to spend on community grants. A new item is the vocational training team. This is not a group study exchange. There are basically two types of them. One is a medical. Tacoma 8 has a group of dentists going to Bolivia this year. The other type is a paired projects. So an example of that, since you're talking about water, the example I use is if you had a project in Uganda or someplace where you're putting in a water system, then perhaps Lakewood Rotary could get Lakewood Water to send a team over there to teach them how do you manage a water system, how do you maintain the infrastructure, how do you do the billing, all of that sort of stuff. So that's what a vocational training team is about. And lastly, looking at the grants and going around talking to the clubs in the district, I see a wide range among the clubs. Using my club, Lakewood Rotary, we are really good at fundraising and patting ourselves on the back. You know, we're already planning for what we're going to do when we have a total donation of $1 million to the foundation. We don't do that well on projects. There are some clubs like Bainbridge Island that are right up here. They do both well. There are some clubs who are really good at spending someone else's money. And then there are some clubs down here that don't want to get involved with the foundation. And they don't give money to the foundation, they don't do projects. So I would ask you to take a look at yourself and see where you fit in this, and then also where your club is. So with that, any questions?
Under the old group study exchange, the teams that went outside the country could not be Rotarians. Under the new plan, these teams that go out, can they include Rotarians?
Yes. Well, there's a real difference between the group study exchange and the vocational training team. You know, they're actually going there to work rather than visit. Anything else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned a multiple club project in Washington, in this area. Could you talk more about what that is and what clubs are involved in it?
Well, we don't have one yet.
Oh.
We haven't approved one. The one that is in the system now that I need to talk to them, in Centralia, Chehalis, they're putting together a $150,000 project in conjunction with the Salvation Army to create a hygiene center for homeless people to shower and do laundry and things like that. So this is part of working out the procedures, so that they're trying to get the three clubs down there to go together to do that. I haven't seen anything yet from the BC side. And I don't know if we will, because their focus is primarily international.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Bill and Melinda Gates, their foundation and the Rotary connection, can you comment on that and bring us up to date on that?
I probably have about as much info as you do, but what I see there is, one of the reasons I've been given that Bill uses Rotary as a vehicle is the money actually gets down to the recipients. There is a match going on. I'm not really on the fundraising side, sorry. I spend about 2 hours a day on the computer trying to help people figure out how to upload a picture. Look around, you find it'd be really interesting to try and do that over the phone. Yeah.
Are there much in the way of, speaking of that, grants from outside of Rotary that come into, you, at the district level, or, I guess, RI International, are you aware of?
Third party?
Outside grants, yeah, third-party grants.
There are a fair amount, and I didn't mention it, but in the funding structure, they're charged 10% for the overhead. And they pay that to get the oversight, to make sure the money actually gets down to the beneficiary. At the district level, we've had a number of grants this year where there are outside third parties. I'm thinking of Port Townsend did some things in a playground, and someone wrote a check for $21,000 for that. So there are other entities that come in with that. So for example, with the mobile one, if the Salvation Army is involved, we need a memorandum of understanding with them, the clubs, and all of that sort of stuff. I'll mention a couple of things that, grants that we've done that you might be interested in. One is food baskets for weekends for school children. Port Angeles has done that all year this year, so that the kids who are on free and reduced lunch take food home with them over the weekend. Our club did that with holiday baskets over the holiday system with the emergency food network. The most, I won't say flashy, the one that caught my attention the most was from Port Orchard, and when I started reading it, it said, in conjunction with the Kitsap County Coroner. I thought, oh, where is this one going? But what they did there, the number one cause of child death in Kitsap County is co-sleeping, or sleeping with parents. And they have a program with a charity called Cribs for Kids to distribute cribs to these families. And they're made by a national manufacturer, but they're made in a sense that the fabric is different. You know, it says that in essence that it was a Cribs for Kids donation, so that whoever the recipient is can't take it back to the store and cash that thing in. If that's it, thank you for your time and your attention.